Good morning, members. Let's call the meeting to order. There have been 3 papers distributed to members for our discussion, and before the meeting, the administration has submitted a paper, EC 1/2014-15-9, for members' reference, and the paper contains information of the latest changes in the directorate establishment approved since 2002, and the 3 proposed applications impact on the directorate establishment. Now, I would like to remind members that in accordance with the rules of procedure 83A, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest on the subject, before you speak, you should disclose the nature of that interest. I should also like to remind members of the rule 84 relating to the voting when you have a direct pecuniary interest. All right? The first item, EC 2014-15-11. That has to do with applications for posts from the judiciary. I have introduced the officials last time. I will not going to repeat to introduce them. So there will be a briefing from the administration who to speak. Thank you, Chairman. According to the instruction from the Chief Justice of the Final Court of Appeal, I would like to make the following points. First, the judiciary must point out that based on Basic Law Article 92, the judges of the XARG and other judicial officers must be appointed based on their expertise and knowledge. And also Article 88 stipulates that the judges of the HKSARG courts must be recommended by an independent committee comprising leaders in the community and should be appointed by the CE. That is the independent committee. The recommendation committee is a very important establishment in upholding the rule of law. Third, the Chief Justice of the Court of Final Appeal insists that in dealing with judicial matters, the basic law and other relevant regulations must be abided by stringently, and there should not be any political consideration in dealing with judicial matters. Now, if we politicize matters being dealt with the judiciary, that will tarnish the public's confidence on the independence of the courts in Hong Kong. So these are the points that I would like to make under the instruction of the Chief Justice of the Court of Final Appeal.
So at the previous meeting, Albert Chen and Chen Chi-Chen has to speak. And based on rules of 31A, this paper actually submitted third motions. And I also ruled that the 4th motion is also directly related to the agenda item. And the motions have been distributed to members already. We did it on December 4th. Before the end of the last meeting, I said that when we resume today, the subcommittee will continue to actually look at the motions immediately. Now, I'm going to, the screen is not on today, but I will, I'm sure our secretariat staff would photocopy the 4 motions to you. Now, I'll handle the motion moved by Chen Chi-Chen, motion number 1.
Hi， 陳志遠。
Chen Chi-yun? Sorry. He's not here yet. Can I speak on behalf of him? No. But can I, without warning, move and speak on his behalf? But you can move 3 more motions, but you have to rewrite them afresh.
搭緊船，唔使再讀㗎啦。
其實我哋諗住咧就睇位
哇！有啲
應該咧就會有時間嘅。咁如果答唔到就可以叫請佢讀都得嘅。
陳志全議員，你可唔可以
Okay, Chen Chi-chun, can you read out your motion? Motion number 1. Yes, can you read it now? In accordance with the ESC Procedure Rule 31A, I move that since over the years the judiciary has time and again employed magistrates to serve as judges in the CFI of the High Court, and this committee requests that in employing judges for the CFI of the High Court, the judiciary should refrain from employing magistrates who have been seriously negligent in their past rulings, or magistrates who have meted out excessively harsh sentences, to ensure that the new judges hired will be competent enough to deliver the duties. Thank you. So now I've moved this motion to a vote. So does the subcommittee agree to handle this motion in accordance with ESC Procedure Rule 31A? Motion number A, that is? Those in favor of discussion on this, please raise your hands. Please hold your hand. Those who are against? You can make a request. So now let's vote by division.
咁所以一陣再請佢哋再講講。
陳月翻嚟啊！
呢邊有未㗎呢個？
有啊，擺佢哋出嚟。寫翻晒個代表先。你要逐個讀出嚟嘅，呢間我啊。你舉手得啦，你哋，我哋逐個叫翻佢嘅名。你可以企起身嘅，你中意。再提醒個。
Please be reminded that now we're supposed to vote on that the subcommittee agreed to deal with the motion moved by Chief Treasury in accordance with ESC Procedure Rule 31A.
好
So those in favor of handling this motion, please raise your hands. We'll read out your names. Wu Chi-wai, Mo Lai Kwong, Chen Wei-yip, Albert Chen, Chen Chi-chun, Lee Kwok-lun, Sin Chung-kai, Ronnie Tong, Fan Kok-wei, Leung Yu-chung, those in favor of dealing with this motion, there are 9 members. Those against, please raise your hands. 10 cap you can lower your hand. Poon Siu-ping, Ma Fung Kwok, Wong Kwok Kin, Chen Hua Fong, Ho Chin Yin, Wong Ting Kwong, Yu Si Wing, Liu Chuan Kwong, Liang Sing. How many altogether? Those opposed to handling this motion, number 12. So we have rejected this motion. Now we move on to deal with the motion number 2 moved by Albert Chen. Well, the motion excuse me, correction here. Those who objected to the handling the motion numbered 11. It's still 9 versus 11, so we can't handle the previous motion. Now we're dealing with motion number 2, moved by Albert Chen. Motion number 2. Any members who want to say anything? If not, then Albert Chen. Do I need to read the motion? Yes, please read out your motion, okay? Chairman, I thought the Democratic Party is the majority here. That's what I thought. But please be quick, Albert Chen. Yes. In accordance with ESC Procedure Rule 31A, I move that since sometime in the future the CFI of the High Court may handle a large number of criminal cases related to the umbrella movement, let me declare my interest. I may be among those involved in those cases. To ensure that the new judges brought in for the CFI of the High Court will handle those cases impartially, the subcommittee requests that in hiring CFI judges, the judiciary must ensure that the new recruits are not members of any organization supporting or opposing the umbrella movement. To ensure that the judiciary can hire judges with a neutral stance towards the umbrella movement, and that the judges can handle the criminal cases related to the movement fairly and impartially. Okay, I'll now approve this motion to vote. Those who agree with dealing with this motion moved by Albert Chen in accordance with ESC Procedure Rule 31A. Those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, you have 5 minutes to vote by division.
你啲動議可以動議嘅，你哋嚇。
You can move a motion.
再提醒各位委
I'd like to remind members again that we are voting on whether to agree with Mr. Albert Chan's motion moved based on ESC Procedure Rule 31A, and that has to do with motion number 2. Those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Yes, I will read out your name one by one. Albert Chan, please put down your hand. Mr. Raymond Chan, Dr. Joseph Lee, Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Mr. Gary Fan, Mr. Charles Mock, Mr. Lang Yu Chong, 7 members are for. Those against, please raise your hand. Mr. Tan Ka-piu, Mr. Poon Siu Ping, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, Mr. Wong Kwok Kin, Mr. Christopher Cho, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, Mr. Yu Si Wing, Mr. Martin Liao, Mr. Ng Lang Sing. Ten against. So the motion is negatived. Now we'll proceed to deal with another motion moved by Mr. Albert Chan, motion number 3. Mr. Albert Chan, please read out your motion. Well, the third motion is similar to the second motion. The second motion has to do with the High Court, and this time, for this motion, is Magistrates' Courts. In accordance with ESC Procedure Rule 31A, I move that since for some time in the future, Magistrates' Courts will possibly handle a large number of criminal cases related to the umbrella movement, to ensure that the new magistrates will handle these cases impartially. This subcommittee requests that in hiring magistrates, the judiciary must ensure that the new recruits are not members of bodies supporting or opposing the umbrella movement, to ensure that magistrates brought in by the judiciary adopt a neutral stance towards the umbrella movement and can handle criminal cases related to the movement fairly and impartially. So I put to the vote the following: that this committee agrees to deal with the motion number 3 moved by Mr. Albert Chan in accordance with ESC Procedure Rule 31A. With those in favor, please raise your hand. Claim to division. The division bell will ring for 5 minutes.
rectify 嗰個 record， 即係 written 嘅 record。你心水清啲，因為我哋一路做一路。
我完晒先至 rectify 翻。
我可以打啲 rectify 翻，唔係你 written record rectify 翻得㗎，冇問題。你有名跟住。 會唔會多一個？胡志偉冇舉手㗎頭先，胡志偉走咗啦，即係 replace 翻埋見員，咁一樣啫。呢2秒鐘。
呢度係10個啦，而家咁樣。
呢邊11，唔係喎，阿郭偉強喺度，加咗都係健馬馮國潘兆平，係。我哋得8個啫喎。
因為有啲走咗啊。
8個啦，得翻8個。黐出住真係。一鐘都走埋啦，唔猛。唔係佢哋翻嚟嘅，討論下高醫生喎，佢哋都會翻嚟。你一早係講俾聽副教嗰個。我提醒下個。
I would like to remind members that what we are voting on is that the subcommittee agrees to dealing with the motion moved by Mr. Albert Chan in accordance with the ESC procedure Rule 31A, and that is motion number 3.
Okay.
With those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Dr. Kwokaki? Mr. Yip Kin Yun? Mr. Charles Mott, you can put down your hand. Mr. Albert Chan? Mr. Raymond Chan? Dr. Joseph Lee? Sin Chung Kai, did you raise your hand? Sin Chung Kai? Mr. Gary Fan? Eight, 4. With those against, please raise your hand. Mr. Tan Ka Piu, Mr. Poon Siu Ping, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, Mr. Wong Kwok Kin, Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, Mr. Ng Lang Sing, Mr. Martin Liao, Mr. Yu Si Wing, Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, Mr. Stephen Ho, Mr. Christopher Chung. Those against? 11. So we will not deal with this motion. Let's move on to the next motion. And that is, again, moved by Mr. Albert Chan, 0004. Mr. Albert Chan. Well, the difference in this motion is that I'm dealing with the remarks made by the judges. So in accordance with the ESC Procedure Rule 31A, I move that since for some time in the future, magistrates' courts will possibly handle a large number of criminal cases related to the umbrella movement, to ensure that the newly recruited magistrates will handle these cases impartially, this subcommittee requests that in hiring the magistrates, the judiciary must ensure that the new recruits have not made any remarks in support of or against the umbrella movement at any public occasions or on any social networking sites, to ensure that the magistrates brought in by the judiciary adopt a neutral stance towards the umbrella movement and can handle criminal cases related to the movement fairly and impartially. Thank you, Mr. Albert Chan. Now let's put to the vote those four. So claims the division. The division bell will reign for 5 minutes.
係啊，即頭啊！完晒呢個即刻投㗎啦，係啊。
嗱，而家要表決嘅。
So now we're supposed to vote on the, dealing with the motion moved by Albert Chan in accordance with the Rules of Procedure 31A, motion number 4. Those in favor of dealing with this motion, please raise your hands. Pokaki, Yip Kin Yun, Mok Lai Kwong, Albert Chen, Raymond Chen, Lee Kwok Lun, Sin Chung Kai, Gary Fan. Those in favor of dealing with this motion, there are 8 of them. Those against, please raise your hands. Tang Kap Yu, Poon Siu Ping, Ma Fong Kwok, Wong Kwok Kin, Kwok Wai Kang, Cheung Wah Fong, Ho Chun Yin, Wong Ting Kwong, Liu Si Wing, Liu Chang Kong, Ng Lang Sing. Those against, there are 11 of them, so which means we're not going to deal with this motion. Now, let's move on to this item EC 141511. Let's vote on this item because we've discussed the topics related to this item. Those in favor of this item EC bracket 141511, please raise your hand. I'll read out the names of those who support this item. Pokaki, Charles Mok, Yip Kin Yun, Albert Chen, Raymond Chan, Lee Kwok Lun, Sin Chung Kai, Gary Fan, Tang Kap Yu, Poon Siu Ping, Ma Fong Kwok, 郭偉強、張華鳳、何聰賢、黃天狂、姚思榮 and Ng Lan Sing. Yeah, please wait. Those against, please raise your hands. Please wait, Wang Ting-Kwang. So this item was supported by 17 members. There were no objections, so I declare that this item is now endorsed. Wang Ting-Kwang, maybe you can ask the secretary, on, voting. It's a matter of the judgment by the chairman. If you have a majority vote in support, then you can declare that the item is endorsed. If there are members who ask to claim a division, then you can do that. Yes, I thought about this because our system is broken down today. Well, that's nothing to do with that. Yeah, thank you for your reminder. Okay, we need to move on to the next item. EC 141512. The recommendation for the retention of 2 supernumerary posts in the health branch of the Food and Health Bureau. That is Administrative Officer grade B and Administrative Officer Staff grade C. This is to actually provide steer and leadership over the various policy initiatives undertaken by the Healthcare Planning and Development Office. In 2014, October 10, the administration has consulted the Health Services Panel. And with us today is co-wingman, Secretary for Food and Health, Richard Yun, Permanent Secretary for Food and Health, and Chris Sun, Head of Healthcare Planning and Development Office of the Food and Health Bureau. So may I ask Mr. Lee Kwok Leun, who's Head of the Health Services Panel, to brief us on what they discussed? Yes, Chairman. On October 20th December, the Health Services Panel did discuss the item. Members supported retaining the Director and Deputy Directors of the Healthcare Planning and Development Office so as to carry forward or continue with the initiatives undertaken by the office. But members were concerned about extending the employment period of the 2 supernumerary posts to 5 years. There were views that, for example, the future work of the office, for example, the healthcare planning scheme, still requires more public consultation. Therefore, we need to review the need to retain these 2 posts in accordance with the outcome of the consultation. There were also members who were concerned that whether the administration could replace the need for a permanent post by keep extending the supernumerary post to up to 8 years. Therefore, the administration did pledge that they will carry out a review 3 years later, depending on the work progress of the office. And because of the wide scope of the Future Development Office, for example, the review of the manpower in the healthcare sector and professional development strategies, and also steering policies related to mental health. Because of the complexity of the issues involved, members urge that the administration must provide adequate non-directorate staff to support the office. Okay, so because the system is down, so please, members. Okay, any who want to speak? Okay, you have 4 minutes to speak. Well, Chairman, for posts like this, they were created for a purpose that we did discuss the reasons for their existence. I think the key now is whether they should be offered for 5 or 8 years. In the Healthcare Services Panel, many members expressed their views on why the posts need to be retained. Of course, the posts were needed for the healthcare scheme and on the regulation of private hospitals and the private sector. and so forth. For regulation of the private sector, there weren't any controversies. I think there isn't much controversy because the administration must and has promised to review the operations of the private medical sector. So we haven't yet got any effective regulations yet. As for the manpower supply for the healthcare sector, that's also something that needs to be looked at with an aging society and also with the increased provision of healthcare services. I think we need to work on that as well. But as for the healthcare scheme, I do have a lot of reservation because the healthcare scheme, the consultation for that has yet to begin. And the secretary a week ago said that they would carry out the consultation within this month. And the outcome of the consultation is still not known. So we are using taxpayers' money to pay for healthcare insurance. I think tax rebates are also part of public monies. So you need to be aware that a lot of money could end up flowing into insurance companies or funds. So for a plan that has so much financial implications, and I think we need to be careful retaining relevant staff for 5 years. That may not fit with what we expected. And Chairman, the administration also said that 3 years later, there would be a review of the posts. So if that's the case, then why can't we have a plan for 3 years and then 3 years later they can just come back to us, come back to the panel, for example, the healthcare panel, or the establishment of committee to have a discussion again instead of having it for 5 years as proposed in the paper. So I'd like to ask the Civil Service Bureau and the officials related to the Finance Bureau, whether you think your proposal now is worth supporting. I think what you propose now is unwise, given the large number of uncertain factors. So why should we need to retain the 2 posts for 5 years? Yes, Dr. Cole, please. Yes, I agree with Kwakaki's point that, yes, the plan to be put forward for consultation actually means that we can make future decisions based on the outcome of the consultation. But as Mr. Kwok understands, apart from the healthcare insurance plan, we also have other work in the pipeline. And also, even though we're going to start the public consultation soon, and yet we've already done a lot of work and had a lot of discussions with various stakeholders with the healthcare reform.
So we are confident of implementing the health protection scheme, HPS. And after the consultation, we may need to make adjustment to our proposals. That's an issue that we have to deal with. But in face of aging population, the government will continue to develop the public healthcare system, but then there is still the need to proceed with the voluntary HPS so that we can sort of strike a balance between the public and private healthcare sectors so that the public healthcare sector will not be overburdened. So depending on the results of the consultation, we would very likely proceed with the HPS. Now, after the consultation, we may need to make minor adjustments to our proposal. Mr. Mack from the CSB. For supernumerary posts, as to how long they will last, it depends on the work involved. So the CSB and various bureaus will look at the work involved, the time and the period needed to do that work. So this is our consideration. Mr. Kwakaki, well, perhaps you can wait till the next round. Mr. Albert Chan, 4 minutes. Generally, for supernumerary posts, they are to deal with additional workload on top of the regular and routine work, and their work will have been completed by a certain time. Now, if I remember correctly, the posts were there for 3 years already, and now 3 plus 5, a total of 8 years. So I think if you're talking about this long period, it deviates from the established policies and mechanisms for setting up supernumerary posts, and the posts will also be going into the new term of the CE, and the CE will serve another 2 years only. So the CE always blames the LegCo for our delays in blocking his policies. Well, he said so in the case of the ITB and Information and Technology Bureau. Now, are you saying that the existing secretaries are useless? Or Jeanette Wong is doing all sorts of technology work. Now, secretary, you are acting like the 689 now. Now, in the bureau, you do have established officers, and right next to you are very competent civil servants. They are qualified to deal with complicated issues. Now, if you rely on these supernumerary posts to the work, then you are saying, in effect, that your colleagues are useless. Now, the timetable of 3 plus 5 is unacceptable. You have good grounds for fixing it at 3 years initially. Now you have to give us an account of why you haven't been able to complete the work within 3 years. When you first made the proposal for 3 years, you didn't expect that it will be extended for 5 years. So you have to explain to us why 5 additional years are needed. So this is all very controversial. Mr. Albert Chan, I would like to thank Mr. Albert Chan for your commendation of our colleagues. Now, for any country which is embarking on healthcare reforms, well, they have a difficult task. Now, in Hong Kong, we started discussing the subject in 1993, and 20 years have lapsed. The issue is quite complicated, and in the many rounds of consultation conducted previously, we have presented many proposals to the public. Now, for whatever proposal which involves mandatory contribution by members of the public, they are all objected to by the public. So for this term of government, we decide that we would keep using the dual-track public health system, and we would put an emphasis on continuing the support to public health care system. Well, Secretary, you haven't explained why 5 years are needed. Well, can I continue? Well, we need to spend 3 months to conduct consultation, and the proposal involves complex legal issues. Now, after the consultation, we need to compile the views received and then see if our proposal needs to be fine-tuned. And then that takes us several months. And then after that, we'll have to propose with legislation drafting. And the earliest we can present the legislative proposals by the end of next year or early 2016 for scrutiny by the LegCo. And then the scrutiny period may take another year. So we may need 2 more years for all these preparatory works. Now, even if the legislation has been passed, we need to set up a unit to take forward the work. So my guess or my estimate is that all these works will take around 3 to 5 years. Now, in the discussion at the panel and the health services panel, last time we agreed that we will conduct a review after 3 years to decide whether we will continue with the extra 2 years. Now, you mentioned about setting up a unit. What kind of unit are you talking about? What will it do? Now, after the consultation, if the public approve of this proposal, then through legislation, we would be drawing a minimum standard for insurance or protection in private hospitals. Well, we have already set out the minimum requirements, and we need an administrative organ to implement those minimum requirements. Now, if the insurance policies with minimum requirements are presented to us, we need a body to vet those insurance policies. So this is quite complicated. Let me add one more thing. This unit will also receive complaints lodged by public on the HPS. Well, for cases like they could not make their claims after purchasing an insurance policy. Any other colleague who would like to speak? Well, second round, Kokaki, Mr. Albert Chan. 3 minutes, Mr. Kokaki. I think it has to do with logic, Chairman. I don't see the logic here. Well, the work will be reviewed after 3 years. So how come that you are not applying for 3 years this time? Now, the consultation work would have already been completed 3 years later on, and then the administration will then in a position to know whether to take forward the work. Well, we're talking about public money, Chairman. I know that what needs to be done has to be done, but then if we are talking about a sum, a tremendous sum here, and the administration said that they are going to conduct a review after 3 years. So how come that they find it logical to ask for 5 years? If this logic works, then, well, you would do the same for all other supernumerary posts. It's not the case that this item is not important. There are works that need to be done, I agree. But then the administration says that a review will be conducted after 3 years. Now, if after the review that you find that the post doesn't work, then what will happen? What will you do? Well, can you give us some examples, past examples on whether on cases where there will be a review after 3 years, and then you are still applying for funds for 5 years? Have there been cases like those before? Now, if there is really concrete work that needs to be done, then after 3 years, electrical will still give you the green light. But I don't think that it works in the approach, for the approach that you propose. Secretary, as I explained, we proposed 5 years, and we estimate that the work after the consultation may take more than 3 years. So I am obliged to raise 5 years if we find that the work takes 3 to 5 years. Now, why we undertook to conduct a review after 3 years? Well, that was made in response to a suggestion made at the panel meeting last time. So we are ready to follow good advice, and because 5 years is quite a long period, so should we take stocks midway? So that is something we agree on. So the work will take 3 to 5 years, as I said. Mr. Mack, anything further from you? Sorry, the speaker is not coming through. Well, we will look at the cases one by one, and we will look at the work involved in the post and the overall operations of the relevant posts and so on. I think the work involved for this post is rather complicated, and we agree that the work may take 3 to 5 years. Now, as to what will happen after the review in 3 years, well, it depends very much on the results of the review. Well, if after the review, if we find it appropriate, can we delete the post? Well, I think we'll have to deal with that later on. Mr. Albert Chan. Well, I'll give the floor to those in the first round first. Well, I've already drawn a line for the first round, so you can continue, Mr. Albert Chan. Chairman, My question has to do with policies and traditions relating to creation of supernumerary posts. The permanent posts are altogether a different matter. Now, I think you are in effect changing supernumerary posts into permanent posts. I think you are acting like the director of civil aid department. Well, a shower room was added to this CAD headquarters, and an extra space of 1,500 square meters is added to this building. Well, all these were not set out in the papers. So I think you are trying to force through the proposal here. You said that no consensus was forged on the HPS. I appreciate your concern, and I think you need to take the work again because there was no consensus. So I agree to that. But then, what if there is strong objection to HPS? Well, you may have to give up your work. So you can't make the assumption that after the consultation, you will proceed with the work irrespectively, no matter what. So can you just say, apply for 3 years and then apply for 2 years later on? Now, if ultimately we decide not to proceed with HPS, what will happen to these posts, people in these posts? Are they left with nothing to do? So I can't agree with the proposal to have it for 5 years. So can I explain a bit further? For this consultation that we are going to do, it's very different from previous consultations. Starting from 1993 and up to 2010, we have conducted many rounds of consultation on the HPS, and all these were on principles. And indeed, after the consultation, views were divergent on whether to take the proposals forward. But after the 2 rounds of consultation done by the 2 previous terms of government, there has been a consensus in the community that voluntary HPS is something accepted by the community. So this is not a consultation on directions or principles, but rather on specific proposals drawn up based on views expressed in the last 2 rounds. So generally, the public are in support of voluntary HPS. So I have every reason to believe that after the consultation this time, we would proceed with the work. So because it is consultation on specific proposals, we'll have to hear views on these specific proposals to see if we have to fine-tune our proposals. So the proposals this time around will be very different from those in previous consultations. We would proceed with legislative arrangements after the consultation. And after that, then we may have to apply for a permanent post. Well, the posts will last a relatively long time, but then it's still not a permanent post. Thank you. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. This post, last time 3 years, this time you're applying for 5 years. I agreed with the members' analysis just now. I understand that you are now in the implementation stage. You try to implement the scheme. But in any case, well, then if you are going to implement the proposals, then I will have to look at the time needed. You said that 2 to 3 years will be needed to make the preparatory work, and then we'll have to also undertake legislative work. Now, for such supernumerary posts, they should not be extended casually. You have to seek approval from us, the electrical, And you say that for this case, it's 3 years, another case 5 years, and yet another case 7 years. So if we consider these are supernumerary posts, these are the posts created for dealing with additional work. And if you extend the post for a long time, that means you don't have to come back to seek approval for us on the extension of time more frequently. So I understand what the Secretary is saying about the legislative work following the consultation work and all that. But then if after the consultation, and we found that members of this public are all supportive of the proposal, then if you come back then and seek us for approval for extending the post period, then we are more than happy to give you the approval. Now, why don't you think that you will extend it for first for 3 years and then seek approval again for another subsequent period?
So, apart from the government, the whole society actually has a consensus about the way to go. So I mentioned about the consultation, consolidating results of consultation, drafting the law, and so forth. So members said that before legislation, we should put things to a halt and see what to do. I don't agree with that, even though I understand what you're saying, because we should look at it as the whole process, from the consultation over the actual plan, and then to see where there's a need for fine-tuning, and also to push forward the legislation, and then set up an administrative unit and so forth. So we should look at all of this as one whole matter. And when we implement the health protection scheme, then we would come back and ask for the establishment of a permanent post. I truly think that this is how we should move on, and the whole process could take 3 to 5 years. I hope that it will be finished, within my term, indeed. But honestly, this sort of work is complex, and in any country to actually push for health protection, insurance, even in the U.S., it took them actually more than 10 years to actually introduce a health protection scheme. Of course, I do respect members' views, but I do think that it will take 3 to 5 years. Next one is Pokaki. Yes, I seldom, I was seldom so long-winded. But I think all you've said don't make much sense, or don't seem logical to me. You said that this is something good, and that's why we can break the rules. But I asked the Civil Service Bureau to give us some, a checklist, and whether there has been some discussions in the paper that, the post was supposed to last 3 years, and now you're saying, well, it could be 5 years instead, and then come back for a review after 3 years. But, the establishment subcommittee, when the first time, when we reviewed the civil service establishment, for all staff at D1 or above level, and when we do implement the policies that the government should make a undertaking that it would not waste public money. For any permanent or supernumerary post, we need to scrutinize their establishments prudently. And the secretary, I think I can't agree with what you said. I mean, because you said no matter what, you said no matter what, you go ahead with it. But I think if that's the attitude, then there's no need for consultation. Like for political reform, you're saying that, well, this is what we're going to do, and we'll just come up with a mock consultation? Are you saying that you would not actually take into account the public views? I think this is something really that should not be accepted. If you want to have a genuine consultation, don't say here that, well, you will go ahead with the scheme no matter what. This is not something the LegCo should accept. And also, I think the Civil Service Bureau should give us some figure on since when have we not stuck to existing rules that we can approve extending the term of a post to 5 years when it had been agreed that it should only last for 3 years? So can you say that, well, now we're going to review in 2 years, 3 years, then we can ask for posts that last for 7, 8 years? What's the point of having a meeting then? I think maybe Mr. Kokaki misinterpreted what I was thinking. First of all, I never said that this scheme must go ahead. But I explained that since Hong Kong is now, since 1993, has been pushing for healthcare reform, and we've had so many rounds of consultation in the last term of the government. There were 2 rounds of consultation. A consensus was reached that voluntary health protection insurance seems to be the way forward, and since we're going to have a concrete consultation, and it will be the first time that the government will have a consultation on a concrete plan, therefore my evaluation is that our responsible evaluation suggests that this time round the society would accept the proposed health protection scheme, even though there may be a need for fine-tuning. Of course, there might be some surprises that came as a result of consultation. I can't say for sure, but my evaluation is, for the most part, the scheme would go ahead with some fine-tuning. So it's my responsibility to see what to do. And secondly, I never said that this work will be done in 3 years, but I want to have a post that will take 5 years. Please, Kokaki, be clear. I am saying that the whole task will be completed in 3 to 5 years. But at the last meeting, I agree to have a review, of the posts. I hope that you would not be confused with that again. Civil Service Bureau, any supplement or any written information they can provide us? Yes, Chairman, as I said, for a supernumerary post, any supernumerary post, there is a time limit, unlike a permanent post, because permanent post is supposed to last for a long time. When we created a supernumerary post, we need to be clear about the time required for that post. For some items, or projects, they have a certain time frame, and you can see when a particular project can be finished. So my information is for each supernumerary post, there should be a time limit for it. And as for whether there could be reviews for a supernumerary post, I haven't got any information offhand on that. Chairman, I just want to ask for paper. Mr. Mack, I think your answers are pretty unclear. I do hope to see if there have been precedents. You don't have the information offhand, it's okay, but can you go back and get us some information about discussions on provisions for supernumerary posts? That can help us to make a prudent decision. I understand it's difficult for you to give us information offhand, but you didn't even. I'm not asking you for the information now, but I know you need time. But I do hope that you have a role to play in the Civil Service Bureau in playing a gatekeeper role. Yes, okay. Mr. Mack, can you check your papers and then see what have been discussed by the Establishment Subcommittee before on regulations or provisions for supernumerary posts? Okay, thank you. Next one is Albert Chan. Chairman, I understand that because of the progress of your work, you need some people to do the tasks involved. But I've seen that, as in the case of other bureaus, at different times there could be important tasks required, like the Copyright Act. The Economic Development Bureau is busy with it, and that's done by the permanent secretary, meeting with organizations, drafting the law and so forth. These are sensitive and complex work. For example, in the Development Bureau, Cheltech, Maine, the permanent secretary, is responsible for the New Territories Northeast Development, and he has to deal with the Town Planning Board. They had, meetings with the board day and night. So each permanent secretary is dealing with a vast area of work and very complex work, and they will be busy at particular periods of time. But that doesn't justify the creation of special posts. So now I don't understand why you have a permanent secretary doing the drafting of the law, and you also have other secretaries helping with the work involved, in the period of drafting the law. So now are you saying that permanent posts are useless, that those in the posts cannot do the work involved? You say that there may be work involved after 3 years. Well, we can consider creating a supernumerary post 3 years later, instead of having a supernumerary post extended to 5 years. So you're saying that you need a total of 5 years to do the work? I think this is actually a deviation from the system and principle of having supernumerary posts. Well, let me explain that this post is not at the level of the permanent secretary. All along, this is a post below the rank of permanent secretary. I will, through the permanent secretary, oversee the work. And these posts asked for are equivalent to the posts of deputy secretaries. So the actual work to be done by these posts are indeed, similar to what are done by deputy secretaries. So, but the permanent secretary will oversee the tasks involved. But you haven't asked or answered the questions. Why don't you create a separate post instead of renewing these proposed posts? Why do you need to create, these 3 plus 5 posts? I think 3 plus 5 posts is really a deviation from, the normal route for supernumerary posts. Well, members, why in the last term of government it was estimated that the post would need 3 years and an additional 5 years? I don't know. I won't comment on that. But to me, a complex task like this, from initiating a discussion to designing a plan, to consulting the public, to consolidating the information collected and fine-tuning the plan, drafting the law, pushing the law. To me, I never thought that the whole task could be done in 3 years. Therefore, as I said, I gave you examples already. Even in the U.S., the healthcare reform in U.S., Obamacare, from its inception under the leadership of Obama, how long has it taken? I think, to be realistic, I think 8 years may be needed. But I'd like to point out that, Mr. Chen, by nature, these are still supernumerary posts, because once the whole scheme is finished, once all the preparatory work is done, and when the whole scheme is kicked off, it will need that amount of time. Chairman, we all know the healthcare reform is a big and complex reform, and the whole process itself could be controversial. And yet, I wasn't expecting so much controversy over the creation of these posts. If the Secretary had listened to our advice for 3 years, plus 3 years, plus 3 years in asking for the funding, it would be less controversial. Secretary, even if we don't have these posts, I'm sure you would use resources within the Bureau to carry out the consultation, right? To be honest. So if 3 years is fine, and then you can come back and create another supernumerary post.
I think that's a more reasonable approach. The Secretary said that this is the direction approved generally by the public. I have reservation on that. If you were talking about mandatory scheme, so everyone was against it. But if you are voluntary scheme, so there is room for discussion, of course. We will give you the resources to do it. But you seem to be saying that you are quite sure that the scheme will go ahead, and that what needs to be done is only fine-tuning. And you seem to be saying that you have everything, every proposal with you, and then you are just doing a mock consultation. So that's why you said that only fine-tuning is needed. Now, how come that if we propose that you can just apply for 3 years and then come back after 3 years for extension of another 3 years, wouldn't that be a more reasonable approach? Now, you said that, well, I originally thought that you would say that even if HPS is a non-starter, that this post still has a lot of work to do, for example, regulating private healthcare facilities, manpower planning, and so on and so forth. Well, these are all side issues, I think. What the crux of the issue is HPS. All right, what percentage of work will be devoted to HPS? Secretary, based on our work, experience, and professional knowledge, we try to give an explanation to members. We may have divergent views as to the time required to complete the work. I can't change your view, but from my professional judgment, I think this is the way to go, and I won't change just simply because members are suggesting something otherwise. I raised the proposal based on our own professional judgment. Now, as to whether you are going to give us a green light and how you are going to approve it, then this is something for the matter. This is something for the ESC to discuss. I don't want to argue or debate with you on differing views. I am raising this proposal based on my own professional judgment and assessment. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. I understand what the Secretary said. This is a judgment and a decision of 3 versus 5 years. Well, after having heard what you said, you weren't able to convince us. And we thought that you should be just given 3 years instead of 5 years, and then do a review and come back to us. Now, for the electrical, and we would not try to block you in proceeding with HPS. Now, as to whether HPS is still there is still consensus on that, well, that is not known yet, because the world changes so fast. The world is changing, so that's why the discussion on the scheme has taken for several terms of the government to deal with. Now, based on this reason, I support 3+3. Well, if you don't change it, then leave it up to us to change it. Perhaps we will move a motion based on 31A, and then we can resolve the matter. Secretary. Members have every right to move whatever motion they like. I'm just acting based on my own professional judgment. Well, you may have different views, and I may not be able to convince you. And then I can't change my stand, saying that, well, we can finish the work in, say, 3 years or 3.5 years. Mr. Wu Chi-wai? Well, I'll read out the names of the members. Yu Si-wing, Kwok Ka-kei, and Merriman Chen. Mr. Yu Si-wing. Well, let's be fair, Chairman, to the panel. Well, when the proposal was first raised, the government was clear that it's going to be 5 years. And then members were suggesting that there should be a review after 3 years. So let's be fair. That's only a suggestion made by members of the panel back then. Well, if we are going to adjust the time period, then that is altogether a different matter. So let's be fair to the administration. Well, if we just blame the government, then we're not respecting the decisions or suggestions made at the last meeting. Now, the government said that after 5 years, there will be an administrative unit set up to extend the work. Would you consider that the people in the posts will automatically migrate to the new unit to be established? Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Yu for your clarification. What will happen after the work is finished in 3 to 5 years? Of course, we can start thinking now as to how the work can be further taken forward. Will the posts in this new unit similar to the existing posts? And I think we need to establish a unit to implement HPS, and I think we should start the exercise afresh. Would you consider extending the posts or migrating people in the existing posts to the new unit? Of course, we will consider the experience of the incumbents in that. We would need permanent posts for the new unit, and then we will make a fresh an application. Well, the work load is onerous, and we need people to migrate to the new unit. You have to think about the transitional arrangements. Even if we approve a proposal for 3 years, you have to think about the transition arrangements. Well, this is something that we will consider when a new unit is officially established. Then the unit will have permanent posts. Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, Chairman. First, I hope that the administration will take the step to change the period. Second, I think the CSB is obliged to provide sufficient information to us. Secretary, I think you are acting or speaking on emotions, rather emotionally. Well, please be clear about this. We're not here to object your work. And we are not saying that we should not be proceeding with HPS and regulating the private sector. Well, we do have certain rules in staff establishments. I think you are playing tricks on us. Well, if you say the work will take 3 to 5 years, would you rather look at the actual situation after 3 years and how the discussion on HPS will be, and then how the regulation on private healthcare facilities is going, and also and so forth, and also manpower review. And after you take stock of the situation, then you can proceed. Well, once the framework is there, you will not be conducting a review on the framework day in, day out, right? Well, you're not sticking to the rules, and you are treating us like rubber stamp here. Now, pro-establishment CAM said that we are blaming the government. No, that's not the case. What's most embarrassing today is that what role the electrical and the CSB are playing in this day and age. The administration shouldn't ram something down our throat. Now, if you have taken heed of our advice that the post should last for 3 years, then we will not be seeing the controversy happening today. I think this is a very bad approach that you're taking. No, I'm not sort of acting or speaking emotionally. I have a calm mind, and I am acting based on the professional judgment. Well, we're not talking about a doctor's professional judgment, but rather a judgment based on how healthcare reform should be taken forward. So my judgment is that the work will take 3 to 5 years instead of just 3 years. So I am easy one way or another. I'm not speaking emotionally here. Now, as regards the rules, the government's rule is clear that for every supernumerary post, the term would depend on the actual needs. So I am sticking to the rules in that sense. So I am proposing the approach based on my judgment, professional judgment, Mr. Raymond Chan. As I said, even without this supernumerary post, I am still confident that with their existing staff, the FHB can still take forward HPS. It's just a matter of timing, the time needed. Now, there are 4 work areas for these posts. Today, we're just discussing the HPS. But for the other 3 work areas, regulation of private healthcare facilities, manpower planning and professional development, and mental health policy. And do you have a plan for the ratio of work among these 4 work portfolios? Well, it seems that these work areas are already being worked on by the FHB already. The civil servants are already undertaking work in those areas. Is that the case? Secretary? Well, in particular, on the regulation of private healthcare facilities. Well, this is an area clearly just raised by this term of government. There is indeed a need to do that. Well, our system to regulate private healthcare facilities is much lagging behind, and that was already discussed at the PAC. Second, for the voluntary HPS, this is an important measure for us to try to strike a balance between the public and private healthcare sectors. We will continue to develop public hospitals, and if we are to make sure that people will use HPS to patronize private facilities, then that scheme has to be implemented. And also another very important point is we have to enhance transparency on fees charged by private healthcare facilities. So based on all these reasons, we need the person to take care of such voluminous work. Well, I'm just worried that the persons cannot cope with so much demand. What about the ratio of work taken up by HPS, 40 to 50% in terms of the time solely on voluntary HPS? But then I have already escalated the importance of the work of regulating private healthcare facilities, so it is on a par with the HPS. In the last round of consultation on HPS, we would also be consulting on the regulatory framework for private healthcare facilities.
Albert Chen, just in case nobody objected to the HPS, but please put it on record. I do oppose it. From the start, I opposed this HPS because to me it's like another MPF schemes, a scheme where interest is just transferred from one sector to another. You know, the public's savings will be transferred to insurance companies instead. So I wasn't convinced of the value of the scheme myself, but I believe that with under the machinery, huge machinery of financial organizations, we will just become, units on the wheels of financial companies, to capitalize on public savings. And I don't think the public will get the protection they need. I made similar comments on the MPF scheme before when the MPF regulations were put in place. But can you also explain to me what are your other colleagues doing What are your colleagues busy with? Many of the policy issues are done by permanent secretaries. In the economic development, Mr. Wong, the permanent secretary there, is busy with the Copyright Act. And now, because you have the regulation of private hospitals and the HPS in the pipeline, then you have to create supernumerary posts. Are your colleagues not tackling new jobs? I think all permanent secretaries need to do or work on new initiatives. So please tell me, under the existing structure, what are your two permanent secretaries doing? Why is there a need for new supernumerary posts? I'm sure your secretary, please don't look down on your colleagues. I'm sure your colleagues, senior colleagues, are very capable. Secretary, yes, Mr. Chan said our permanent secretary is very competent. And from the beginning, our permanent secretary has been helping me with actually taking forward the design and plan for the HPS. But it's just that now, with the proposed supernumerary posts and the proposal to extend the posts, we actually do have with us, we will have with us staff at the rank of deputy secretaries to take forward what we've done. But if I can't convince you, of the advantages of the HPS, but I really don't like, comparing HPS with something mandatory, because HPS is voluntary. But I will try to continue to lobby Mr. Chan for your support. Next one, Ellen Liang. Thank you, Chairman. I think the crux of the debate here is on whether this scheme or this post should be extended or not. But I think if we actually let's talk about logic here. First of all, in 2012, we allocated funding for 3 years. And in today's paper, paragraph 27 on public consultation, let me quote, you say we, I think that means the secretary, had undertaken to review the need for continued retention of these posts after 3 years, taking into account the work progress of the HPDO. In the paper submitted by the administration, back to logic, Secretary, I'm sure you are calm enough to understand. You've said that you're not sure whether there's a need to retain this post 3 years later because you have undertaken to do a review. So logically speaking, why isn't it that we create the post or we have the post for another 3 years? That is by 2017, 3 years later. No, I think I should say 2018. Yeah. Why isn't that, by 2018, when we've seen the outcome of the work, and after review, then you come back to get funding for 2 more years. And Chairman, based on the Secretary's logic, just then he said that supernumerary posts by the government must last till the tasks involved are done. In other words, he should have asked for funding for an 8-year post. But I never heard of a supernumerary post that's open for 8 years. Therefore, I doubt the Secretary's logic. I hope that he wouldn't be carried away by emotions. Yeah, don't worry, I won't be too emotional. As I explained earlier on, if you're not clear, let me explain again. Please just answer my question. You don't need to explain. Very clear, 2 very clear questions, Secretary. I'm not being emotional. Yeah, can you answer? I just gave you the questions. Please give me the answers. Mr. Liang, the undertaking for 3 years was done in response to concern raised by the members, but that doesn't mean that I have changed my view on how long it will take. How long we need the posts for, but how is it that based on in 2012 we should have created a post for 8 years? If that's the case, may I ask the Finance Bureau, the Deputy Secretary, there to tell us whether you had applied to electrical for funding for a disciplinary post that's open for 8 years. But Secretary, as I said, this is a very special case worldwide. When you're initiating healthcare reform from beginning to end, it's something very controversial and complicated. Therefore, to make initiatives for healthcare reform, to me, is not surprising to require posts that take 8 years. And we have made reference to healthcare reform experiences around the world. 8 years isn't really a long time at all. And when it comes to the rules and regulations, I can't comment on that. But on any country, if there are any military rules, and if you want to ask someone to apply for an 8-year post in phases, 3 years in each phase, for example, I can't comment, but I can say based on my own experience, I do think that the whole task actually has a very slim chance of being completed in 3 years alone. So it will take actually from 3 to 5 years at least. Secretary, yesterday during the public hearing of the Public Accounts Committee, the Director of Civil Aviation said he thought that his office needs to have a shower room. And he also thinks that there needs to be a dancing studio with a glass ceiling window in his office for dancing. Well, I just received a motion moved by Kwok Kak-kee and Wu Chi-wai based on the establishment subcommittee procedure 31A. Now we've only got 6 minutes left, and there are also other motions moved. Before I take a vote on this latest motion, I like to ask to extend this meeting by 10 more minutes, so that Kwok Kak-kee and Leung Kwok Hong can speak later on. And then we'll deal with the motion number 1. So any members who object to extending this meeting by 10 minutes? You object to the extension? Okay. Okay. Five minutes, extend the meeting by 5 minutes. Okay. Any objection? Well, I think please ask the Secretary. If a member objects, then that means objection by the whole subcommittee. I think Wong Ting Kwok objects to extending the meeting by 5 minutes, but I think my original proposal was to extend the meeting to 10:45. Please be calm. Okay, please let me finish. Wong Ting Kwok. Okay, let's have a vote. My suggestion to members, please be quiet. Mr. Wong Ting Kwok. Now let's put it to a vote that we will extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Those in favor of this, please raise your hands. We're voting on extending this meeting to 10:45.
Bác明 10
10 members. Sorry, let's count again.
再舉多次
Please raise your hands again. Ten members in favor. Those against, please raise your hands. Six against. So I have decided to extend the meetings to 10:45. Okay. So, Pokaki next. Pokaki? Chairman? I'll just like the Civil Service Bureau. You can just sit here and do nothing about the discipline issue. If the administration can, does not stick to the rule when it comes to establishment, then how can we have a meeting, especially for supernumerary posts? To be honest, every time we try to be very prudent about the length of the posts, we can't just casually, make changes. It's stated very clearly in the paper that there should be a review in 3 years. I'd like to ask you, when you came across a similar scenario in the past, would you suggest to the relevant bureau to make a more reasonable choice of sticking to 3 years, and then 3 years later, when the work needed is largely done, when the consultation is over, then the bureau can, depending on the situation, then ask for an extension of the post, of the period? I'm asking the Civil Service Bureau. Yes, we made it very clear that for every supernumerary post, there's a time limit. As stated in the paper, very clearly, we have considered the length of time required for the work, and we propose a 5-year time limit. So that's like a standard approach, the standard time limit for supernumerary posts. The Bureau, in this case, in response to the views expressed by the panel, it agreed to have a review, midterm review. That, of course, is in line with what's allowed under the system. So I'll say that I can say that there are these standard provisions there, and every time it depends on the work needed before, the amount of work needed before is decided how long the post is for. Next one, Leung Kwok Hong. Well, the secretary is a doctor, and there are infectious diseases in the world. Under the central government's liaison office, under the system, since Mr. Chung Hu-Ming came to Hong Kong, I think the establishment of the liaison office has swollen, and it's got more than 1,000 staff in Hong Kong now. I think, of course, also that there shouldn't be a pay rise for senior civil servants. The pay rise should also be offered to lower grade civil servants. Secretary, but you don't have any logic. How much does a copy of Apple Daily cost? Well, you're getting more and more pay, and you're asking for supernumerary posts. You're calm. People ask you to look at it 3 years later, and then you responded by saying, well, no, I think it will take 5 years. But I'm watching over your wallet. What are we doing here? I know members maybe members here may be stupid. We think that the work can be, well, what's the need? Why the need for 5 years? We're just asking you. You don't need to lose your temper. Don't you think that when you meet a patient, would you just say that, well, he's going to die, there's no need for any special diagnosis? Would you say that I think he would die, so we don't need to spend any more time to cure him? Well, as a patient, I would like you to look at my situation and see what can be done. You don't need to lose your temper. You need to understand our difficulties. If the news broke that in the future that the person having the supernumerary post have not got much to do, then we'll be blamed. You are supposed to be accountable. You will be gone then, but LegCo will still continue to exist. Once you're gone, when we're blamed, where will you be? And then you come back and say, well, I'm not coming back to be official? Do you understand what we're saying? Why should it last till 2018? Your government's term will not even last till 2017. You may be a doctor then.
Mr. Lang Kwok, do you need the Secretary to make a response? Well, if you serve as a doctor again, then I will ask people not to consult you. You have to understand political logic. You are just a doctor. Do you need the Secretary to make a reply? Or he could go back and reflect upon himself. Well, I would like to say something, Chairman. First, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, please. Well, think about this. Is it you who loses temper or me who loses temper? Mr. Leung, please consider retracts some of his remarks, especially the last part on my being a doctor. Well, please let the Secretary finish first. Second, I'm quite disappointed. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong mentioned about logic. I think our logic all along has been very clear. Well, you may not agree to my judgment, and my judgment is that this work will take 5 years. And why we say we would conduct a review in 3 years' time, because we were ready to follow good advice at the panel meeting last time. So we agreed on a review after 3 years. So I think I've made myself very clear, Chairman. Does any other member wish to speak? All right. Any other member wishing to speak? Mr. Leung Kwok Hong? Well, let me say something first. Dr. Kwok Kaki and Mr. Wu Chi-wai, based on Rule 31A, have moved a motion, and that is in accordance with the ESC procedure Rule 31A. I moved that the 2 supernumerary posts under head 140, 1 administrative officer staff grade B and 1 administrative officer staff grade C, their retention period should be changed to 3 years. I would now rule on this motion. I think this motion is related to the item on paper EC 2014-15-12, and because of time constraint, I would now decide that we will adjourn the meeting, and then in the next meeting we will decide on whether we would discuss this motion number 1 moved by Dr. Kwok Kaki and Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you very much, members, and thank you, government officials. Meeting adjourned.